Let me show you how I made this ceramic mug in my home pottery studio. This is one of the first mugs that I've ever made, so please be kind that the handle is a little bit short. So I begin, as with every pottery piece that I make, by laying down some ceramic clay and carving into the surface some rings. This will allow me to place the wooden bat on top. What I found from the clay that I use is that it's relatively soft, and when I've thrown on the potter's wheel, if I go to lift that clay off later, it tends to warp. So I choose now to throw my pieces on a wooden bat and then I can lift that off later. So once that's pressed down and secured, I apply my lump of clay and seal it down onto the wooden bat with my index finger. I'll then let the clay run between my hands without really applying much pressure, and this will help smooth it out into a bowl. Once I've got that bowl shape sorted, I then can focus on coning. So as you can see here, I'm slowly raising the clay up into a cone shape, and this is to ensure that all the clay particles are facing the same direction and that the clay itself is nice and centre. If there is any odd undulations in the clay or inconsistencies with texture, this can make it quite difficult to throw and can cause it to dry inconsistently later on. So it's really important to take your time here in this and ensure that you're getting a piece of clay that's really centre and really consistent. You can see once I let go with my hands, the clay appears to be relatively stable and will kind of stay in one place. So I lift the clay up and then I press the clay down, and I'll continue that until it's one homogeneous ball at the centre. You can see here it's a little bit wobbly, so I'll just keep repeating that process until I'm happy that the clay is nice and centred. This is something that you really feel with your hands as the clay slides underneath it, rather than kind of seeing with your eyes. Hopefully that makes sense. I have noticed in recent videos that I'm using a lot of water during the coning process, and I think in future pieces I'll attempt to try and use a little bit less. I've noticed that by using more water, that can sometimes make the clay unstable. So from other pottery videos that I've been watching, it's good practice to use as little water as possible. Next, I open up the clay and offer it out. You can see here it's starting to wobble and it's gone off centre, so I just correct for that by placing my hands over the top. I then push down on the base of the clay, making sure that the bottom is pressed against the bottom of the bat, and then I begin lifting. So what I'm doing is pinching the clay here by having my outside hand slightly lower and pressing in, and then my inside hand locked by my thumb or my index finger on the inside of the bowl, and that's slightly above the other index finger that is on the outside of the cone here. And I'll continue to repeat this process, lifting the clay up until it's a desired height. As you can see, it was a little bit off centre at the start, so I've had to now come back in afterwards and correct for it. You'll notice that I pinched it in, so it tapered in towards the top, and then as I put my hand in, it pushed the clay back out, so it was a consistent thickness all the way up. Next, I want to remove the slip from the edge of the mug, so I'm using this wooden piece here, and rather than pressing the wooden piece into the surface of the clay, I hold it a fixed distance and push from the inside of the mug out so that the clay gets pushed against it rather than the wooden piece into the clay. Now I'm just removing any slip from inside the mug, as well as tidying up the inner walls with the sponge, making it as smooth as I can inside. Then I'll run a wire across the bottom several times just to ensure that the clay doesn't stick to the bat later. And I can then prise it off. So here's how it looked after throwing, and I've recently purchased this little tub that I can put the pieces in whilst they dry out. So it's a couple of days later now, and the mug is leather hard, and what I'm going to do now is stick it back to the wheel. So I'll apply a little bit of slip and place the mug body on top. This will cause the mug to stick back to the wheel again, and I can pull it off later. I'm now just tap centering, and I'll begin trimming off the edge with this tool. You can see there's some slight wobbling happening around the lip, and that's absolutely fine, because when I flip it over here, I can now correct for that on the base. I've seen a lot of pottery videos that undulations like that can be resolved by just leveling off the base, and it's best practice to do that rather than changing the lip. So you'll notice as I start to remove pieces of clay from the bottom of the mug body here, that the undulations and the wobbles will slowly stop over time, and the piece will spin relatively cohesively. So you can see here already that wobbling has stopped. I'm struggling a little bit to catch the clay there, and now you can see that the whole piece there is spinning relatively centrally. So I'm just trimming up the edge there, and now I begin cutting out the clay in the middle to form the shape of the feet. I really enjoy carving as part of the pottery process. I find reducing the clay down like this is really therapeutic, and slowly chipping away and taking pieces of clay off, very, very peaceful. I'll then burnish the underside and the edges with the wooden tools, as you can see here, before finally just creating a chamfered edge there, and that will allow the mug, when sitting on the surface, to look much lighter. Because I've placed the mug on the rim and the wheel was a little bit dirty, the edge of the lip of the pot wasn't too clean. I haven't centered it here, so you can see it's a little bit wobbly, but I was just quickly cleaning up the lip of the mug, so it doesn't matter too much. With a wet sponge, I then just clean all the surfaces and now begin on making the handle. So I've never made a handle before. I've never been told how to do one before. So all I'm going off here is some YouTube videos that I've watched, and you'll see that I made some very basic mistakes in a minute. So what I'm doing is pinching the clay to create this kind of handle that I'm going to pull off. And then on the clay body, I will score it in and apply some slip. The slip will help stick the clay body to the handle itself, and you achieve this by sticking the handle to the top, pressing it down, and then bending the handle over like this. So once I've got that in, I'll smooth the underneath pieces, and I'm just using the handle here to leave a mark on the body of the clay, and then I'll repeat the process of scoring the body, adding the slip, and then pressing the handle back down. So here's the slip, and then I will place the handle over, ensuring that it's nice and straight, and then pressing down the clay and smoothing out the edges like that with my finger. Next, I'm going to take this little wooden tool and just tidy up all the joints, making it look like the handle has come out of the body naturally, rather than being added later on in the process. I'll continue to work on this and refine it and make it look like the handle blends cohesively into the body of the clay, and I'll do the same with the top underside of the handle too. So here's the final piece. As you can see, the handle's relatively small, but hopefully in my next one I'll correct for that and everything should be fine. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe.